So we going? We're
We're going.
Okay, so preparation. So this is the meat and potatoes of this installation training. Preparation means what do you need to do to be safe and to be productive. So safety, super paramount. A lot of ways to hurt yourself on a job site if you are not educated. So when you cut, drill, or sand fiber cement, it creates a lot of dust. If you breathe that dust in, it's not good for you. So there's some things you can do to avoid breathing that dust, and that's to ensure adequate ventilation, cutting outdoors. We only show that you need to use a mask if you're cutting indoors. I'd say use that all the time. As a bare minimum, we only say that you need to use a N95 mask. So N95 means it gets 95% of the particulate. Doesn't get all of it. The beauty about that is that with the mask, there's much less strings attached with it. So if I use this, I don't have to have this fitted by industrial hygienists. I don't have to have a lung x-ray. I don't need to have a lot of the protocol that they build into when you're using an air purifying cartridge system. So I could have a cartridge respirator and still be in trouble because I didn't have it fitted by industrial hygienists. I didn't have it inspected or graded. These are much cheaper and without all the OSHA or WSHA attachments with it. No facial hair for that. Work outdoors, that's the key. Don't work indoors. If you do, definitely make sure you're PPE'd up and that you use some mechanical ventilation to clear that area if you don't have that set up. I'm typically going to try to, with the wind in my back, so anytime I'm cutting it's blowing away. Use your environment to help out what you're doing. My big thing is with all this, I'm still holding my breath. Because even with the cartridge respirator, you still get a lot of that particulate in there. So well-timed breathing, good PPE. Other suggested safety equipment, and this is really key. The safety glasses, because of the silica, because of the wire collation on these guns, they're very hard on your eyeballs. So between the product and cutting it and nailing it, you definitely want to wear safety glasses. Very important piece. If I had anything, this would be the most important piece you want. Hard hat's good as well. If you are working below anybody, it is a requirement to have a hard hat, a Seahawk hard hat. Avoid your warranty. You don't wear this while you're doing it. Now, pretty smart earplugs. When you cut and nail fiber cement, it's very loud. When you cut and nail anything, it's very loud. So make sure you wear your ear protection. Cut resistant gloves if you can take a little ribbing from the other guys on the crew. I had an old guy when I was doing concrete. He's like, "Oh, are your hands cold?" Shut up, Gary. Okay, so additional information can be found in our material safety data sheet. It's going to tell you what to do if you get it on your skin, you breathe it in there. So storage and handling with all products, especially fiber cement, it's really key that you don't install wet. So to keep from getting wet, make sure you store it on a flat area, that you're using something in addition to the bonnet that's on it. Those get ripped and torn. So make sure that as a standard procedure, I had a big tarp and it covered my siding as well as the trims that were getting in there. You can't finish a project that's soaking wet. Caulking doesn't stick to wet trim, it doesn't stick to wet siding. The biggest thing with wet siding is that it's hard to handle. It's flimsy. Number two, if you paint it while it's wet, it can effloresce. And number three, and the most important, is that if you soak fiber cement, it can shrink. It doesn't expand and contract, but if you soak it and put it up wet, it can shrink. I was told a 32nd a foot when I worked for a different manufacturer. So 12 foot times 30 seconds, like 3/16. So just like anything, and you can tell pretty easy if it's wet. Oh, that's good sealer, Tom. That's some good sealer. Maybe
Just on samples.
What if we got a raw board?
Yeah, right here.
Maxi tile. So this is 6-side sealed too. It's noticeably a different color. It's a real dark gray. There's no issues distinguishing wet board versus dry board. People ask me all the time, and you're going to get this question as well. My product got wet. What do I do? Well, you need to dry it out, and then they're going to ask, well, how long should I dry it out? And they go, well, you know, that's hard for us to determine. Between heat and wind, you know, let it dry for a couple days. Can we tell you how long it's going to take? We can't. The only way to really tell moisture with fiber cement is to weigh it. Moisture meters don't work on fiber cement because you don't have the cellulose fiber in there. So there's no easy way to figure out how much moisture content. And we're actually meeting with a guy next week that has come up with a manufacturer that's got a test that they can do on the material for doing cold weather installations, for like where you're up in Quebec. So that's where it actually started. We had a bunch of commercial jobs in Quebec that went south, metal framing, high temperature swings, had a lot of cracking on there, and part of it was because the material was installed wet and it dried, and the metal framing is real problematic as far as expansion and traction. So the moral of the story is store it flat, store it dry, and carry it on edge. So any fiber cement will microfracture if you carry it flat. It might not break, but it's really hard on the substrate. And if it's a pre-finished product, it can actually microfracture the finish too. With those microfractures, it lets water in it. It's not good for it. You probably won't get 50 years out of it if you damage the board before you put it up. So carry it on edge, keep it dry. Fairly simple, but it's pretty rare that you see that. You'll see two guys with it doing this number. We don't recommend that. Carry it on edge. It'll lay flatter on the wall. Once it bends like this, go figure when it goes on the wall, it's not very straight. Okay, what happens when the product is improperly handled or stored? So that's an issue there. Tarp would have been good. Something heavier to keep that on there would have been good. That's the worst case scenario. It's frosty and frozen, and it probably won't lay down flat when you put it on there. This is not good as well. You can tell that this board here is pretty wet, much darker color. So wet boards are hard to handle, they can shrink, and if you paint it wet, it can cause some issues with your finish as well. Tools and accessories. Chapter 2. Okay, so some safe ways to cut the product. The safest way would be to use this fiber cement shear. They're not my personal favorite. These work great for backer board. Has anybody ever used one of these?
Mm-hmm.
You can get your chance today. These are great for ripping and cutting. What they don't do real well is notch. When you put those two together, it kind of mushes it up. And that's not the place where you want to mush up fiber cement. Those are one board at a time. This is one board at a time. Your two safe ways would be the guillotine. And I actually promote these because I like that for the shingle panel. Our shingle panels are 16 inches wide. If you don't have that, you're measuring, marking with a framing square, and then having to cut it. With this, you've got a fence on there up to 22 inches. It works really well for shingle panels. So if you get a huge project that's using shingle panel, $400 tool, probably pay for itself in a week, depending on how big the job is. Very good tool. With either,
Do we recommend the blades, like a diamond blade, or is it
just a fiber cement blade. We don't have any endorsements of anything.
Okay.
They did a test in Fine Home Building that showed the Hardy blade being the best blade. The